Welcome, everybody, once again to Screw the Hustle Summit. Today, we are talking with my very good friend, Marley Majcher, and I'm so excited to have you here all the way from LA. We've been friends, and I've learned so much from you over the years. She is, of course, the party goddess and also the profit goddess. And so she just is, and also she is like the hustle-free goddess now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I am so excited that you're here to let us know like what you've been doing and how you've kind of cracked that code to get your life back and starting,
Right.
not being a slave to your business. So, Marley, do you want to just kind of walk us through a little bit about what your business is and your journey from, because I know that, your dad was always like, but are you making any money at it?
Yes. Still is, by the way. As soon as I start drinking too much of my own Kool-Aid, he's like, yeah. So tell me, so do you want me just to jump in?
Yeah. So because you started out in catering, right?
Yes. So you'll go on.
Okay. So just kind of walk us through that journey of yours to up until like, where your business was. And then we're going to get into a little bit about this, a recent turning point you had.
Sure. So I got my business degree from Georgetown, and that is a significant point because I met my first husband there when I was 19 years old, and he was 20 years older than I was and was a chef. And that, because everybody says, how did you get into the food business from being at Georgetown? So I decided I needed to marry him. That's a whole other story for a whole other podcast. So he and I got married, and what do you do when you marry a chef is you're never going to see him unless you're in the same business. So we opened a restaurant, and from there we started a catering company and took over a banquet operation, and then had a child and all kinds of things, which is, you can imagine, financial pressure, et cetera, et cetera. And I was very focused, like a lot of entrepreneurs, on my sales and what my revenue looked like, and also what my life looked like on the outside. Now, these were the days before social media where everything was, instant and on our phones, but there still were newspapers and magazines, and I got very caught up in what I wanted my world to look like from the outside instead of making sure that I had a solid business foundation on the inside. And that's kind of ironic considering that, I went to one of the top schools literally in the world. But it just goes to show you that we can all get off track, and it also goes to show you that we can all get back on track if you set your mind to it. So after getting divorced, I got into fortunately, we partnered up with the restaurant, and then I got into event planning, and that was in 2000. And I was like, okay, don't have 100 people on my payroll anymore. I can kind of start again. It was like this great Phoenix moment, white blank canvas. But then here's the thing, is that I fell into the same trap that I'd fallen into before, which is I was focusing on sales instead of balancing the sales with the profit, which is kind of going along your whole line of hustling. And you don't want to just hustle, and you don't want to just be busy. And that's the tagline to my book, stop being busy and start creating cash. The point is to be focused and purposeful about what you do. And who cares how many hours you work? If it's 2 and you're accomplishing your goals, great. Make it the most effective 2 hours ever. And I think what happens so many times is we get just off course, whether it's with social media or somebody else's goals or dreams. And I got caught up again in, the whole hustle. And I knew, and there's some good parts about that. I knew I needed a differential advantage for my event planning business, because obviously Los Angeles and New York, 2 very saturated markets, and you have to have a differential advantage. That goes for any business, no matter what. And I focused on getting celebrity clients, which I did. And then that got us into People Magazine and the Wall Street Journal, and, on every major network, and doing TV segments. And I was flying around the world. And there was one time I remember where I was doing an event in LA. And that afternoon I got on a flight to New York. I think it was Fox and Friends. The next morning was back to LA within 24 hours. And at that point, I had 2 more children. So then I had 3 kids. And, it was exhausting. And I have a great resume to prove it. But it wasn't until Then I ended up going on to write a book to solve my own problems, as if I didn't have enough going on. And then what happened, this was a big turning point for me, was a little less than 3 years ago, I was in this, I thought, amazing relationship, and I got text dumped, which I never, ever saw coming. And I know everybody says, like, well, how did you not see it coming? Well, believe me, I didn't see it coming. And I thought, here I had the love of my life, and got text dumped. And what I did was what I knew best, which was working. And so I just worked and worked and worked and put my head down. And I was like, I didn't want to feel the pain. I was in so much pain. I couldn't even function. And I was just like, I need to get through this. And I still have 3 kids and very hefty expenses. So I worked, and then I got, kind of at the end of the summer, I had this weird pain, and I thought I had a pinched nerve in my back, and I just ignored it and kept working. And then in November, I remember it was the first time I had a couple days off and I wasn't going to have kids. And I took a train up to Portland, and I was like, gosh, this is so weird. And when I woke up on the train the next morning, my pinched nerve had switched sides. And I was like, pinched nerves do not switch sides miraculously. And so I came home, and I ended up flying home. I had the hallucinations in my hotel room for 2 days, and was like, God, I do not feel well. And then I came home, my girlfriend took me to the ER, and they were like, first they thought, oh, you have the flu. And then they were like, oh my gosh, they did my blood work. And then they thought I had meningitis. And then they literally freaked out. They couldn't figure it out because I was shaking really violently, and I had 105 fever.
Oh my God.
I was in the ER, and they got me a room, and I was there for a week and a half, and they said I would have been dead within 24 hours if my girlfriend hadn't come and gotten me. And she literally came, because I was like, I need to get out of the phone. I don't feel well. And she's like, she just literally came to my door, picked me up. I was crying. I was like, no, I just want to go back to sleep. And thank God I didn't, because I would never have woken up. Because it was one of those days, like a lot of, single moms, I finally had a break, and I had a couple days where I wasn't going to have my kids. So I wouldn't have had anybody around. It was a Sunday, and I wouldn't have had kids. I wouldn't have had a nanny there until the next day, that next night. And so she took me, thank God, to the hospital. And I was just like, oh, this is stupid. I had a date that night. I was and I was just like, and they were like, girl, you're not going anywhere. And the bottom line was, it turns out that this UTI had gone septic, and that's why I had less than 24 hours to live. And then I went into heart failure and liver failure, and I got ARDS, which is this acute respiratory distress syndrome after pneumonia. And I got my last rites. And then, they were like, are all your medical directives in order? And I was like, what are we talking about? And they were just like, your best case scenario is you're going to leave here without one of your kidneys. And I just was like, what? How? And it was just all because of this dumb breakup that just spiraled me literally out of control. And I didn't, I just wanted to not feel it. So I just worked and thought that would be the answer. And it would have been a good answer, probably at 80% of the pace. And that really changed my life, obviously, forever, and changed everything about how I run my business and my life and my friends and all that stuff now.
Whoa. I mean, that's a
little more than you bargained for, isn't it?
Well, you said you were 24 hours away from possibly dying.
No, not possibly.
You were going to die.
I was going to die. I mean, my system, everything shut down. I mean, at that point, they could see the sepsis. I mean, I shouldn't have even really been alive at that point. So no, it was game. You don't come back from sepsis. I mean, that's just, people died just of that, let alone of everything else. I mean, I was having lung punctures because they couldn't get the fluid out of my lung. It's one of those things where once something starts going south, it's kind of like everything else. You have this tipping point, which is sort of what you're talking about your whole summit. You have this tipping point, and then all of a sudden it just goes.
But you literally were working yourself to death.
Yep.
And, and this is what this whole summit is against, is because we were talking about this earlier. So many entrepreneurs we get in, to face it, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be driven. You have to love to work hard. And I think for a lot of us, that's our battle armor. You know,
right.
the going gets tough. We're going to put that in, head down, and we're just going to like work through it no matter what. Because, and I also think a lot of our society puts so much pressure on us to work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you know, like don't take a break, don't be lazy.
Right.
And had you fallen into, like, listen to those voices, you wouldn't be here right now.
Well, yes and no. I mean, here's the thing. I listened to the voices forever. I guess the point is that I really didn't get the message. I mean, it was like God or whoever you believe in gave me the message, because it took my girlfriend, like, she kept calling and texting me and I wasn't even returning her calls. And she's like, well, if you have the flu, then why are you out of breath? I mean, she literally came to my house, came in the back door, got me out of bed. I was like, no, I was crying, to put me in the car. Like, I wasn't going anywhere. Like, I was like, no, I'm just going to stay in my bed. And she literally was like, no, because I wasn't even at that point. I mean, I was literally hallucinating because I had this fever for 3 days. But, and I think what's important is that, especially with everything that's going on in the news right now about all these college scandals, and it's kind of like the opposite, right? It's like, oh, you're not smart and you're going to pay somebody off to get into school. And I was the exact opposite. And I had very bad ADHD that wasn't diagnosed till, a few years ago. And so I had always had to work very, very hard. But I think that's the point, is that there's one side, which is like buy your way in and kind of do nothing and be on the crew team, whether or not you've ever seen an oar in your life. And then what I did, and it is somewhere in the middle. And I think your message is so amazing, because I do think you need to work hard and I do think you need to focus, but it all has to be purposeful, and you have to listen to, just like when business we're taught, we listen to the market, right? We do what do your customers want? What products are they asking for? What services? We have to listen to ourselves too. We have to be our own market, right? We have to say, I am really not feeling well, and I really haven't been feeling well for quite a while. And be our own kind of barometer to nip that stuff in the bud. And hopefully with podcasts like this and summits, you are going to get that message out that, listen, if it can happen to me, and I'm the girl that, it's not like I was 300 pounds or had health problems or something. I mean, I was the girl that was working out every day. I was the girl who was having the green juice and the vitamins, and which is probably what kept me alive, quite frankly, as long as it did, was just because I had this very strong, health regimen and everything else. So if it can take me down, and my dad's a doctor, and like, I don't want to say there's no hope, but I mean, we really have to be mindful. And I think especially too, as women, we have to really watch out for each other. If it hadn't been for my girlfriend being like, that's it.
So, that's literally a life-changing moment that you went through and experienced. Now that you've come out the other side as a business owner, what have you changed with how have you changed your approach to working with your business? Like, where have you set those parameters that you didn't have before?
Well, I've always been a huge believer in goals, and I have always, and I still am. That part hasn't changed. I've always been a huge reader. I mean, I read constantly. And so what I did was I took these things that I love, which, I'm competitive and I'm strategic and I love to read. And I also love to, thank goodness, share with others where I made my mistakes so they don't make the same. And so what I've done is I've said, okay, what are the good aspects of my personality and the things that I naturally love, and how can I channel those? And so I started asking myself a series of questions like, hey, do I still want to even be an event planner? Do I still want to run the Profit Goddess and do business coaching? Like, I got the opportunity, because first of all, I was on bed rest. So I got the opportunity to think way more about anything that I wanted to. And I really rebuilt it from the ground up. And what was very interesting was I made many decisions. One, I am very careful about who my friends are. Thank God I have amazing friends. I'm also very careful about my vendors and assistants and staff and people with whom I work. I no longer am willing to work with people who just don't get it or don't have integrity, or because when you get to that point, you just realize it's not worth it. And you might have one more minute on this life. And I don't, and the other thing too, is I got even more purposeful with the clients with whom I worked. I really wanted to work with a certain caliber of client who was going to pay me what I was worth. I didn't want to be chasing all this bottom feeding client stuff. Cause I was like, man, I could, you never know when you're going to go. You have to make your life what you want. And I think then I also was like, if I feel myself getting stressed out, I started doing like walks for like 20 minutes in the afternoon. And I used to think, oh my gosh, exercise is solely so that you can fit into your clothes. And I still kind of believe that. But I realized if I'm stressed out, and like my assistant will be like, maybe it's time for that walk. And so then I go and I feel better. And it's just about blowing off the steam and knowing when you're at those limits. But you just can't, you can only milk the goose that lays the golden egg for so long. And then that parable is true. The goose will stop laying and then be like, the dead duck, dead goose.
Right. Well, and that gets into the whole idea about self-care, which I know gets bandied about a lot, and people like, oh,
Right.
like lavender baths, but it's not that. It is literally taking care of the goose.
Yes. And I think we have to, and it goes back to that word about being purposeful and strategic and putting first things first, so that, I will do the lavender baths, and I will certainly watch my reality TV show if that's what I want to do. But I do everything so that I get all of my heavy lifting done in the morning. I'm very specific with, these are the top things I need to accomplish today. These are my overarching goals for my company for the year. And this is how it breaks down to the month and the week and the day. And we talk about in my office, like buckets, what's the bucket for today that we want to put this piece to bed. And then I go and relax. And I think what happens is the reason people hustle so much is because they do it the opposite. They don't have the specific direction and the plan. And the overarching goal, if you're here and you want to go here, the goal helps you create that strategic plan. It backs you into those steps. If you say, I want to make $1 million within the next 5 years, well, that's a very specific set of steps. There are many ways to get there. But if you say, I want to make $1 million by December, that's a totally different strategic plan. And so I've just gotten very specific about, this is what I need to do, and this is what I'm willing to do to get there. And quite frankly, I think I accomplish more now than I ever have, because I'm mindful of the time and my brain capacity and, just my physical capacity.
So are you now finding that you've gotten, your workday is shorter than it was pre-medical emergency? Walk us through some of the things
Sure.
that you've implemented to from pre to where you are now, and how that has affected how you're working and how you're become more like hustle free.
Sure. So to me, I wouldn't say that I work. I can't really say that I work less. Here's the thing. I work in a much healthier way. Let me clarify that. I am somebody who very randomly loves to work. I genuinely, my work is my play, reading magazines and coming up with new recipes. And lately I've been cooking tons. And, I've been just into so many different things, whether it's like bone broth and growing things in my garden and adding that to the bone broth because it's good and healthy. And then, the trends of the bone marrow and all that other stuff. So that is work, but because it feeds into my work, but my work is my passion. So it's like what I do is I will still read and I will still travel, but I guess what I don't do is I now say to myself, listen, don't hustle and take an event, in my case, that doesn't have any profit in it. Like I stop and think, here's where I am. Here's how big this job is. Here's what my cost of goods sold and my expenses are going to be. This is what I can potentially make out of it. And so instead of just running to do proposals and being crazy and, oh, we're so busy and we have all these calls, it's like, you know, my assistant, my team get annoyed with me sometimes because I'm like, we're not bidding on that job. There is no money in it. There's no, and I do plenty of things for charity. It's not that. It's that if for work stuff, what is it in this finite amount of time? Because if you take projects that aren't a match for your goals, for your profit margin and everything else, all you end up doing is working all the time, right? And then none of your clients are happy. You're not happy. So I think that's what I do differently is I always knew that. We always know focus on your target audience and focus on your client and focus on, but now I'm even more so where I'm just like, you know, I just make myself, we're not going to do it because I don't want to just work every weekend for the sake of taking social media photos and saying, hey, I'm working every weekend. It's not going to get me to my end game. So I hate that phrase of like working smarter, not harder, but I hate to say it. That's the freaking phrase.
Well, in your first book, But Are You Making Any Money? That's exactly, I mean, you broke it down so brilliantly because you got into all those nuts and bolts about how do you take that and figure out if you actually are, like, what's your profit margin? What are your hard expenses? And, you know, because I'm also an event planner and I know a lot of us get so caught up because we're like, oh, we want to make pretty fun events, and pretty work.
Right.
And we don't think about it from the business owner perspective.
Right.
And so even though you had that before, it seems like you're doubling down. And
I am doubling down. And the other piece is I think, because I'm really trying to, part of the reason I wrote my book was because I didn't feel like there at the time we all talk about what you need to do, right? You need to do this and you need to. I want to be like, literally, what do I do? Like I wanted to know, paint by numbers. Okay, I don't feel like I'm making enough money in my business. What do I do? And so in my book, I go, sit down, take 2 to 3 projects, take all of your receipts for them, take a pencil and paper, literally do this, stop, then do this. And it really is a prescription for how to get to the root of, you know, what projects make you money and what you like doing the most. And so one of the tips that I have as I'm sitting here doing this interview with you is I'm looking outside and it's a beautiful Southern California day. And I have an almost 6,000 square foot office that I don't go to that often. And the reason is because I do my best work at home. I'm fortunate that I don't get distracted. I get distracted by things, but I'm so like when I'm working, man, I am working. And that is one of the decisions I made is to be able to work in the environment in which I want to work. And sometimes, you know, I spend a lot of time in the Caribbean. I go to the Caribbean for work and for work projects, but I get a lot of work done there. So I guess I've been also much more purposeful about, sure, go to the Bahamas. I don't need to go and spend 2 weeks partying. I can go for 5 days, totally recharge my whole system, get plenty of ideas, and just sit there in peace and get my work done and my email done. Because nobody said you have to do your 9 million emails in a cubicle. You know, I can go outside and sit outside and do my emails or do my financials or do all these things that I have to do. And it's just by switching the environment. And I think that for women, that's an important component. There are plenty of things that we can control. And I don't care if you live in a freaking yurt in Africa, you know, there's beauty and you can adjust the things you can adjust, right? Until you can adjust a little bit more, and then you adjust a little bit more. But those things have made a huge difference. And I think those are the things that keep us from getting stressed out. You know, when we have the freedom or we create a schedule that allows us the freedom to go for a walk for 20 minutes, and then you come back and there's so much data behind. It's the blue sky and how the blue affects creativity and the oxygen and the air and being outside versus being inside. And if you use those things to your advantage, they can all take your business to the next level, and they're free, right? But it goes back to what's your goal? Where do what's your longitude and latitude?
And when you start implementing, like this change of, okay, I can go to the Bahamas, I can chill out, I can get so much more done, I can take 20 minutes for a walk. Did you deal with, at the beginning, with any kind of feelings of like, oh, guilt, or like I shouldn't be doing this, or I'm like slacking off?
Yes, because here's why. I mean, fortunately, kind of these rebels like Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Work Week, fortunately, they kind of broke through a lot of that and said, hey, listen, you can work from anywhere, et cetera. But I still, I mean, even a few years ago, I would, obviously, which is the situation I still got myself into, I still didn't give myself permission to take the time that I needed. And the other thing too, is I always thought I was weird. I was like, I mean, I am kind of weird, but I was like, why do I need to go to the Bahamas to work? Why can't I just sit and work and be focused here? Well, I don't know. So those are some of the questions I stopped asking probably after I got sick. Is that, well, why do I need to do this? Now I'm just like, I don't really know, and I don't really care. I just, that's what happens. That's what I need. That's when I need to clear my head. And so that is what I'm going to do. Do I feel guilty? Yes, but I have to keep reminding myself, and I'm big on data, and I'm big on statistics, and I'm big on metrics. And so I will say to myself, okay, you want to go and you want to take that amount of time. I mean, I still know what my hourly rate is, whether I charge an hourly rate or not. I still know what it is, and I know how much I need to produce in a certain time period. And so fortunately, I've done my numbers, and I know when I'm being effective and when I'm not, and I know how much it costs me to be out of town versus in town. And you weigh those things. But the nice thing is, it's no longer an emotional decision like, I feel so guilty. It's like, somebody can say, I can't believe you're going to the Bahamas. And I'm like, well, guess what? Here's the proof is in the pudding. Here are the numbers. This is what I get done. This is, I write X number of e-zines, and then I promote X number of whatever. And this is the bang for the buck that I get. And when it's measurable, the guilt starts going away a lot faster, because I think especially women, we suffer like this crazy amount of guilt for everything, no matter what. We're not in the right place at the right time.
Well, I feel like also it's the exterior expectations that, that we're supposed, I don't see why you should feel guilty if you want to take a walk or get your work done in the Bahamas. But I feel like
we do.
What's that?
But we do. That's the thing. It's like this whole head game of, it's like certain people, it's like, oh, well, I don't want a jet. I don't want to whatever. It's like, then who cares? Just what is it that you want? That what freedom or what lifestyle is it that you want to create? And then having a plan to create it. But so much of business is your mindset. And that's another word that's way overused. But it is your mindset in terms of figure out what you want and what your best life is. And, we know, I think at the end of the day, if we really should be feeling guilty, but.
Well, if you're, slacking off and not making any money, then of course, but I think to kind of throw off the shackles of, if you're not working. I mean, I think that is very much from the whole, the Puritan mindset. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a whole other anthropological discussion, but I feel like, I think there's more of that in North America than in Europe for sure.
No question.
But do you feel like, because I think you're so strategic, and that's what I've always loved about, the work that I've been following you for years. You're very, you're almost like your precision, is you get right down to the heart of it. And it's not about, you don't color it with emotions, because it's either it's black or it's white. It's making you money or it's not making you money.
Right.
And I feel like there's so many people in business who are just kind of going, oh, it feels right. Or, oh, this is going to be a big deal for me because I'm going to get really great exposure.
Right. And so that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I guess what I've tried to do is I've tried to come up with a system and a formula to make things black and white. I almost think of it like medicine, right? Where you're like, here are your results. You need to do this. However, that's where the art kind of comes into it, because nothing is really black and white. Although I've created these, okay. But it's like, once you have the facts and the specifics, then you get to step back and put and kind of fill in the soft stuff again. So for example, there are events that I take where I'm not making any money, but here's the difference. I now know I'm not going to make any money. That is a totally different story than taking an event and not knowing what you're going to make or what you're not going to make, right? Totally different. It becomes a choice. And so the other thing is, there are many assets out there that are not just cash or Krugerrands, right? I can do an event and I can say, I'm going to do this event and I'm going to get X amount of publicity with X amount of celebrities. But here's the difference. I know how much that publicity is worth to me. Mm-hmm. And I know I can't do 3 events like that in a row in, let's say, January, February, which is my slowest time of the year, because I'm not going to have any money coming in, right? So then goes, it's black or white, you're not going to make money, well, then I'm not going to do this charity event. It isn't that way. You say, I'm going to make money working with all these different clients, so then I can choose to work with this charity and do it completely for free. But I call it, you're trading an asset for an asset. If I'm going to do something for nonprofit, or not for nonprofit, for example, but if I'm going to do something in exchange for publicity, I want to know I'm going to have X amount of hard costs. I'm going to put X amount of time into it, and I'm going to get X amount of photos, shout outs, tweets, and this is approximately what it's worth, so that you're making a decision. I go back to this whole non-emotional decision. You're doing it the best way you can. And then of course things happen, right? At least you've made an educated guess, and you're not just the victim of not knowing where to focus. And I think that's been probably one of the biggest lessons, is now I feel like I know exactly where to focus. I still get dragged and I still get pulled, but it's like, I have to be responsible for myself and come back to what it is I want. I'm not going to just go where the wind blows because somebody else is saying this is the trend and this is what I should be doing.
So, I mean, I think the takeaway that it's coming very strongly from you is that you are being your own North Star. Mm. You are not, you've got like a compass,
right?
Not spinning around like a flag in the wind.
No.
Right now this is trendy. And
no way. You have to, I just go back to this. You have to have you have to have a map. You have to have a strategic plan. That doesn't mean that you don't change course. It's like, there's a statistic that I read that I love, which says, and again, I'm going to get it wrong, but you'll get the point. It's like an airplane is off track technically like 85% of the time, because it's always kind of going this way and it's trying to avoid turbulence and it's trying to do this, but it's trying to go from here to here. And so I think what you do is you create the plan and then you course correct, right? Mm-hmm. If something comes up that you're like, oh, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of, fine. But it doesn't mean that I haven't started my day and have my week and my month planned out so that I know what my highest level of activity is going to be, like whether it's sales or writing or something like that, and then you adjust. But this is with 99, maybe 100% of my private coaching clients that I see, it is the same thing. It's like, oh, I get so distracted. I get pulled in these different directions. Baloney. You cannot let yourself get pulled in another direction. It's just kind of like, it's like if my kids say, oh, well, somebody was cheating and everybody was doing it. That has nothing to do. What everybody is doing, what the wind is blowing, the sun is out, the sun is not out, it's night, it's day. It has nothing to do with it. You've got responsibility for your actions and what you want to accomplish in the world, and you've got to go through and accomplish that. And it does not matter what else is happening in the world. I mean, to a certain extent, right? But yes, I am my own North Star, and take feedback and I listen and read and put all of it into my process, but then I make my own educated decision. I'm not going to just say, oh yeah, I'm going to jump on this bandwagon. I used to. Obviously, that's what got me into all my, so I'm not sitting here going, oh yeah, I've got it all. Yeah, I kind of have it figured out now because I did it exactly the wrong way for 90% of my life. Now it's just like, and you've got to be so strong because there are more and more and more things pulling us in different directions than ever before. And I think with technology, that's just going to keep going that way.
Right. It's a shiny object syndrome.
Totally.
So just to wrap this up, like what would be yours, if you could give somebody who's starting out as an entrepreneur, what would be your number one tip to them?
Number one is set very specific goals. And you've got to ask yourself, what do you want? If you want to be, and it has to be a SMART goal, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. I think it is. And it has to be, it can't be, I want to be a YouTube star. It has to be, I want 1 million followers on YouTube because that will net me $200,000 a year or whatever. It just has to be very specific. So I would say, be very specific about what you want. And I talk a lot about this in my book and this program that I'm going to give away to one of your viewers for free is I talk about, making sure your ladder's up against the right wall. So what happens is sometimes we start businesses or we get into business and we have these problems and we look at these symptoms and we think it's, oh, I just need more customers. And usually a lot of times that's what my coaching clients will come to me and say, I need more customers, or I need customers to pay me more. And I'm just like, I'm not so sure. So you have to get to the root of the problem. To get to the root of the problem, you have to make sure your ladder's up against the right wall, right? Otherwise, all we do is climb, only to realize we're climbing up the wrong freaking mountain. So you can climb as fast as you want. You're just going to get to the wrong place faster. So that's what I would say. And then kind of the sub points to that would be tracking your time and making sure that your time is kind of like tracking a diet, what you put in your mouth, and you realize, oh, I'm kind of 5 pounds overweight. Well, you start writing it down. You realize, well, yeah, because I'm eating Ben and Jerry's at 10 o'clock at night in my bed. Okay, cut that out, make this change. And it's all about these 2 words I always say, which are, you've heard me say, I'm sure many times, course correcting. It's about going on the journey and then just like the pilot with the plane going, how's this working? Because what happens is otherwise we get to the point like I did in the hostel, which is, how did I get here? Like how did I get here? The daughter of a doctor who should have known better on every single level. How did I get here? And now I'm about to leave 3 children motherless. No joke.
Wow. I mean, Marley, thank you so much because you've literally gone through the fire.
Yes.
To a point where, and you've come back from that brink.
Yes.
That, if that doesn't change your life, then I don't know what would. And
there's no hope if it doesn't. Yeah. If I didn't get the message at that point, I was at last call. Yes.
Yeah. But thank goodness you're here and you're stronger.
And I get to do things like this.
And better than ever. And, and you're able to share this incredible experience and what you've learned from it with other people. So, so that we don't have to walk to that brink.
No, nobody needs to get that close. I'm very happy to tell you what it looks like. You don't need to get to that edge of the mountain or the cliff. Just take my word for it. Call me. I'll tell you. Just step away from the ledge.
Well, Marley, thank you so much for taking time out to meet with us today and to share your experience and your incredible wisdom and insight. And just gobs and gobs of great takeaways here. And reminder to everybody, I will be sharing all these takeaways in the Facebook group. So check in. I'm going to be putting it into a point form there. And also check out below because Marley is going to be giving away her course to one lucky viewer.
Yeah. And then you can get the course through you. And the other fun thing is that kind of wrapping up all of what we've talked about is we just launched this productivity quiz. And of course it's titled, Which Cocktail Are You? And it's free and it takes literally 2 minutes, but it's a really good reminder and a really good test about, hey, how productive are you? So that then you can, and then we give you all kinds of tips about based on your personality and how you work, how you can get more productive. And it's totally free. And so that's something that we're going to give the link for everybody that's listening from your podcast.
And I did the quiz, and it's so much fun.
It's fun. I mean, for me, everything these days has to be fun. If it's not fun, I'm not interested.
And that's why we love you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and stay healthy. And so we have you around for a long time.
I will. Thank you for having me, Larissa. This is great. And thanks for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Marley.